Hey guys, Chris from Adaptuition here, and this is video number 5 in my error correction series. If you want to see the previous videos on this topic, I'm going to put a card up there and a link in the description below. Just a few reminders before we get started. 1. Be sure to have your writing material ready so you can take notes and try the questions as we go through the video. 2. Use the timestamps in the description to jump around to specific parts if you know specifically what you want to take a look at. 3. Check out my website to download handouts on POA, especially one for this topic. 4. Be sure to visit my Facebook page where I have free past paper solutions to paper 2s for maths and POA for January and May for about 10 years, and AdMaths. Now AdMaths has no January sitting, they're only May solutions, but I have all of them available for free just for you. Okay guys, let's jump into the work. In the previous 4 videos on this topic, we dealt with errors that did not affect the agreement of the trial balance. Why? Because the errors affected the debit side and the credit side by the same amount. And because of that, the trial balance will still agree. However, there are other errors that will affect the debit side and the credit side differently, and that will cause the trial balance not to agree. So I'm going to use the acronym WUSA, W-U-S-A. 4 examples of errors that do affect the agreement of the trial balance. The W stands for wrong, more specifically wrong side. Have you ever done a trial balance and you've put something on the wrong side, as in something that was supposed to be in the debit column, you put in the credit column, or vice versa? We've all been there. And when we do that, the trial balance will not balance. Now, wrong side also applies to T accounts. Many of us here have put an entry in a T account on the wrong side. We are all guilty of it. And when you do that, what will happen is the trial balance will not balance because you've affected one side differently to the other side. The U stands for unequal entries. What this means is that the entry on the debit side is not equal or is unequal to the entry on the credit side. Think of a credit sale. We were supposed to debit debtor and credit sales. Let's say the amount was $1,200. And let's say we debited debtor for $1,200, but we credited sales for $120. Now in that case, the trial balance is definitely not going to balance because we've made an error that affected each side differently. So that's going to be a problem. The S stands for single entry. In this case, it means we made a debit, but we forgot to make the credit, or vice versa. We made a credit and didn't make the corresponding debit. So once again, we see an example of the debit side and the credit side being affected differently. And that will definitely cause the trial balance not to agree or not to balance. And lastly, A, arithmetic errors. Basically meaning you made an error in your calculation. When you were adding up the figures in your account and trying to balance off, you made an error. And when you checked it over with your calculator, then you realize, hey, I did something wrong. Or maybe you were adding up figures in your trial balance and you punched in an incorrect figure. This can even happen with software packages like Microsoft Excel or other things if people are not aware of how to use them or are not checking their formulas properly. Now, disclaimer, those are only 4 types. I am sure that there are other types, but I'm going to let you do your research to find out if there are other types. And what I'd like you to do, leave a comment in the comment section below telling me, Chris, this is a type of error that affects the trial balance that you didn't mention in your video. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at what happens when a trial balance doesn't agree. Okay, so here we are taking a look at the trial balance of balancing. As a trial balance as at 31st March 2017. So let's go straight to the totals. So the debit side total is 100,000, but the credit side total is 137,000. And Captain Obvious tells us the credit side exceeds the debit side by 37,000. We could see that. So this is a case where a trial balance doesn't agree. So how do we fix this? Well, it implies that there are errors in our bookkeeping system, or one of the 4 errors I mentioned. So what do we do? Now, sometimes we have to make the trial balance temporarily while we search for the errors. So how do we do that? Well, we literally put in the amount that needs to be put. So what you're going to see is we are going to call that figure the suspense account figure. So basically we are kind of left in suspense. We are left waiting to figure out where is this 37 come from, what is causing this imbalance of 37,000. And while we look for that, we leave the suspense account balance in the trial balance to make the trial balance agree. So now when we add 37 to the debit side, it's going to be equal to 137, and that's going to make the trial balance temporarily. As a matter of fact, let me scroll down a bit so you guys can see the note, right? So it says this is a temporary fix, right? And you need to find the errors that caused this and fix them in order for the trial balance to balance correctly. Now, if you had to do a balance sheet before you found these errors and corrected them, what would happen? Because each of these items here in the trial balance goes in some part in the balance sheet. Your non-current assets section, current assets, current liabilities, non-current liabilities, or capital. They go in one of those sections. Where does the suspense account go? Well, if the suspense account balance is on the debit side, we treat it as a current asset. Now, it is not a current asset, but we put it there because it has a debit balance, and assets have debit balances. If, however, we had to put the suspense account balance on the credit side of the trial balance, then we classify it as a current liability. Now, it is not money we owe, but we put it there because it has a credit balance. So that's how you deal with suspense account balances. So let me just rearrange some stuff now, and I'm going to give you guys a couple of trial balances to balance. Okay, so in question 1, you guys are seeing a trial balance here. So what I want you to do is I want you to add up the figures in the debit column, add up the figures in the credit column, and see that they differ. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Pause the video and do it. Okay, let's take a look. So on the debit side, we are going to see a figure. So 22 and 10 will give us 32. On the credit side, 20 and 8 is 28. 28 and 15 is 43. Okay, so now what I want you to do is to figure out the difference, right? As in subtract these two, see what the difference is, and I want you to put that difference in the column with the lower total. Right? Take a pause and try it. Okay, ready now? So that figure will go here on the debit side as 11,000. And what do we call that again? We call that the suspense account figure. And what we'll have to do, of course, now is change this, because now the trial balance will balance. So there's a suspense account figure on the debit side of our trial balance, and this item will appear in which section in the balance sheet if we had to put it? In the current asset or current liability? What do you think? Current assets, because current assets have debit balances. All right, okay. So that was an example of what I want you to try. So I'm going to give you another one to try right now. All right, so this is question 2. So I want you to do the same thing. I want you to add up each column, get a total, find the difference, put it on the side that needs it, as in the side that has less, and label it suspense account. And then fix your totals so the totals agree. All right, take a pause and try it. Okay, ready? Let's take a look. So 50 and 70 would give us 120,000. 45 and 60 is 105. 105 and 5 is 110. So therefore, this side needs 10,000 to balance. And we're going to call that balance, that figure, is the suspense account figure. So when we put it there, we're going to change this to 120 to make it balance. Now, this suspense account figure, sorry, hold on one second. All right, that suspense account figure is on the credit side of the trial balance, which means if we had to do a balance sheet right now without finding the errors, we would need to put this in which section? In the current liability section. All right. Okay, so give me a couple of seconds. Let me rearrange some stuff and we will continue. So now we are going to talk about that suspense account. What is it? What do we do with it? How do we use it to help us balance the trial balance? And how do we reconcile? Okay, so let's take a look at this trial balance. So we have a trial balance here, and the suspense account balance has been inserted for us. It's 70,000. It's on the debit side. So if we had to do a balance sheet, that balance would be put in the current asset section. Now, right below the trial balance, you're seeing that we have some more information. It says the following errors were well, it should say were. Let's change that. Were discovered. So the bank is understated by 50,000 and the loan account is overstated by 20,000. So we have two entries here and they are one-sided entries. So most likely there was a calculation error. Whoever was doing it made an error in their arithmetic and these things resulted. And because of those two things, the trial balance doesn't agree. How do we fix this? We use the general journal. Now, at this point, if you are watching this video as your first video in the error correction series, I'm going to strongly suggest that if you are a bit weak with double entry, go back and watch the previous 4 videos. It'll take you a little while, but I strongly suggest it because error correction uses double entry and the general journal heavily. And if you're not comfortable with it, you're going to not find the process to be, well, pleasant. Okay, so trust me on that piece, right? If, however, you've seen the previous 4 videos and you're feeling confident with your double entry, let's give it a go. Okay, so we know that the word understated means that the balance in the account is too low. To fix that, we are going to have to increase the balance in the account. How do we do that, with a debit or a credit? Well, it depends on what the account is classified as. Is it asset? Is it liability? Is it revenue? Is it expense? Is it capital or equity or any of the others? Right? What account is it? It is the bank account. Bank is an asset. So it's understated, which means it's too low. To fix it, we have to increase it. And how do we increase the balance in an asset account? We have to debit the asset account. So let's go across to the general journal. Right? So we need to debit the bank account. Now the thing is, because it is a, now listen to this part carefully, because it is a one-sided error, because it is an error that affects the agreement of the trial balance, we use the suspense account to facilitate the correcting double entry. I'll say that again. Because it is a one-sided error, because only one account was affected by this error, we use the suspense account as part of the double entry to correct the error. So if we debited bank account, the other account, being suspense account, needs to be credited because every debit needs a corresponding credit. So if we're debiting the bank account to increase the balance because it was understated, we need to credit some other account, that account being the suspense account. So we're going to credit suspense account for 50,000. The double entry, the narrative will say to correct the undercast bank balance. Okay, so let's just take a peek back at the second error. The second error was that loan was overstated by 20,000. What is overstated? You know, if understated means that the balance was too low, overstated means the balance was too high. How do we fix that? We have to reduce the balance. How do we do that? With a debit or a credit? Once again, it depends on how we classify the item that was overstated. All right? This is a loan. A loan is usually classified as a liability. And liabilities, how do we record decreases? Because if it's overstated, it's too high, we have to decrease. How do you record a decrease in a liability? With a debit. Let's go to the general journal. So we are going to put, we are going to put a debit to loan. So once again, this was a one-sided error. This was an error that affected the agreement of the trial balance. And because of that, because the error was only in one account, there's no other account affected by the error, which means we need to use the suspense account to facilitate double entry. We need every debit, this item here, this debit here, needs a credit. And that credit will go to the suspense account. And we will simply put a very simple narration to correct overcast loan balance. All right, so what I want to do is I want to make the suspense account visible. And this is, it's a T account. It's nothing special or different, right? And first thing we're going to do is we're going to put on the debit side, we're going to put the balance, because let's just take a peek back at the trial balance, please. So in the trial balance, you're seeing that it says suspense account here, and you'll note that this is the debit column. So it means that we actually do have an account named suspense account, and it has a debit balance because that was the amount that we needed to make the trial balance. It's on the debit side, therefore the suspense account will have a debit balance. Let's go back to the suspense account. So the suspense account has a debit balance. Now it says it's supposed to say difference as per trial balance. Because of the layout on my Word document, I had to kind of abbreviate or skip out certain words, so I do beg your pardon. But please note it's supposed to say difference as per trial balance. Now what do? Well, let's look up in the general journal. We have two credits to make to the suspense account. One for 50, one for 20. So we have two credits. One for 50,000, and it will say bank because this one here, the credit went to suspense, the debit went to bank. So here, when we're crediting suspense, we put the name of the other account affected by that entry. And the second one will say 20,000, and it will say loan because we, in the journal entry, you're seeing the debit to suspense, the credit to suspense, and the debit going to loan. So when you enter the 20,000 credit in the suspense account, you have to put the name of the other account affected by this item. Now, because of that, take a look. When we add up the total, when we get the total on the debit side, it's 70,000. There was only one entry on that side, and the two entries on this side total to 70,000. And the suspense account balances. And what that means is that now your trial balance will balance. If you did up your suspense account and you still had, you had to balance it off and there was a balance carried down, your suspense account, your trial balance wouldn't balance because you either didn't find all the errors or you didn't correct them properly. So with that, let's take a look at the corrected version of the trial balance. So we have here the capital figure, and we're going to put here, right, bank. So the figure before was 90,000 we increase it. Remember, it was undercast by 50,000. And if it's undercast, we had to increase it, which means, well, the balance is going to go up. So 90 plus 50 is 140. The loan account was overcast, so you're going to see us subtracting 20,000 from the original figure of 40, and that's going to give us that 20,000 there. So these are the two figures that we adjusted. And now let's add up, right, each column. So 140 and 60 will give us 200,000. 100 plus 20 is 120. 120 and 80 is also 200,000, right? So that there is how we use the general journal and a suspense account to correct the errors that are affecting the trial balance agreement. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to give you guys a couple to try. So give me a couple of seconds, let me rearrange some stuff, and I'll be right back. All right, so what you're seeing here is question 1 in its entirety. You have a trial balance that you're going to have to find the suspense account balance for. Then you have the errors right below that. You have the general journal on the right-hand side, and you have a suspense account. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on the initial information so you can see it a bit more clearly. And then when I zoom out, you guys could probably pause the video again in order to be able to do the rest of the question, following the formats or whatever the case is. So let's zoom in on the trial balance. Okay, so pause the video, find the suspense account balance, and then I want you guys to try the general journal entries. Okay, so did you try it? So let's take a look at the suspense account balance. So on the debit side, we had, I need to find my cursor. Oh, right, there you go. Right, so 250 plus 300 will give us 550. And on this side, 200 plus 125 is 325. 325 and 150 is 475. Ooh. Right, so the suspense account balance will be on the credit side. And the difference between them is 75,000. So now we could change this to 550. Did you guys get that? If not, pause the video, try it again, and then unpause. Okay, so let's take a look at the errors below here. So it says we have an understated loan by 25,000. So let's bold these words, these keywords here, so we kind of can see them a bit more clearly. So we understated the loan, vehicles was understated, utilities was overstated. Okay, so if you need to pause the video and try the general journal entries. Okay, let's go ahead. So we have an understated loan. So understated means the balance in the loan account was too low. How do we fix that? We have to increase it. We have to increase. It has to go up. Loan is a liability. How do we record increases in liabilities? We have to credit the liability account. Let's go across to the general journal. Now remember, in your general journal, your debits come first. In every transaction or adjusting entry or entry recording, the debits come first. So I'm going to put the credit, I'm going to put the loan, I don't know why I did that, right? The loan, I'm going to put loan, but you're noticing that it's on the credit side. And up here now, I'm going to put suspense account, right? Now, why am I putting suspense account? Once again, we had to credit loan to increase the amount in the loan account because it was understated. So we had a credit, but because it was a one-sided error, there was no other account that was affected by the error, which means we use the suspense account to facilitate the double entry. Every credit needs a debit. And we can put a very simple narration here, right? To correct undercast loan. Okay, cool. Now let's go back across to the other error. So vehicles was understated. So vehicles is an asset. If it's understated, that means the balance in the account was too low. If it's too low, we have to increase. How do we increase assets? We debit the asset account. Okay, so let's go across to the general journal. So this one is going to be kind of easy. So we are going to just debit that account, vehicles. And because it was a one-sided error, what does that mean? There was no other account affected by the error. So we use the suspense account to facilitate the double entry. Every debit needs a credit. So we have suspense account for 30,000 being credited there, and we put to correct undercast vehicles. Let's go back across to the error, to the last one. So we had overcast utilities. Utilities is an expense. Overcast means it was too high. How do we fix that? We have to decrease it. To decrease an expense account, we have to credit it. So let's go back across to the general journal. So in the general journal, if we are going to be crediting utilities, we're going to have to debit an account. Once again, it was a one-sided error. What does that mean? No other account was affected by the error. That implies we are going to be using the suspense account in order to facilitate the double entry. Every credit needs a debit. And the narration, very simple, to correct overcast utilities. Now, let's take a look at the suspense account. Okay, so in our suspense account, first thing we need is the opening balance. Let's go back across to the trial balance to see what balance we're supposed to use and on what side it's supposed to be. So, sorry, one second. I wanted to highlight that. Okay, so we have a $75,000 balance on the credit side. So let's go back across to the suspense account. And we're going to go on the credit side, and we're going to put 75. Oh, this, by the way, you're seeing I'm using $1,000 figures. So I'm not putting all these zeros every time because, once again, because of the layout of my Word document, I didn't have much space horizontally, so I had to save space somehow. So I do beg your pardon if those things are confusing you, but just try to follow along as best you can, okay? All right, so let's zoom out a little bit so we can see the general journal. If it's already not visible, maybe it is. All right, so first things first, I'm seeing a debit to suspense for 25 as a counterbalance to the credit to loan. So let's put that on the debit side. Next, I'm seeing a credit to suspense for 30 as a counterbalance to the debit for vehicles. We're going to put that on the credit side here. And finally, I'm seeing another debit to suspense for 80 as a counterbalance to the credit for utilities. So we're going to put that here. Aha! So 25 and 80 will give us 105. 75 and 30 will give us 105. Boom! All right, so what I didn't do was I didn't put the trial balance for you to redraft the corrected figures. If you want to do that, by all means, it's good practice, but I won't have a solution for it. Okay, let's scroll down to try one more practice question. So give me a couple of seconds, let me rearrange some stuff. All right, so let's take a look at this trial balance here. So we have a trial balance and we have some errors below. So pause the video, balance the trial balance, do the journal entries, do the suspense account. Okay, are you ready? All right, so let's take a look. So this trial balance, we have a debit side. So 130 and 120 will give us 250. 50 and 150 is 200. 200 plus 80 will give us 280. So this side needs 30,000 to make it balance, and that will go to the, that will go to the suspense account. All right, so let's highlight this and make it bold. I like things like that to stand out. Let's take a look at the errors. So the first one says capital was understated by 100,000. What does understated mean? It means the balance in the account is too low. How do we fix it? We have to increase it. Now, how do we increase capital? With a debit or a credit? With a credit. Let's go across to the general journal. So the general journal, so we know we make our debit entries first. Just for the sake of illustration, I'm going to put the capital account. I'm sorry about the screen jumping up and down. I have no idea why it's doing that. I'll see if I can fix it in post. So if I do fix it and it's not jumping, just forget I said anything. You didn't see anything. Right? If you know where that's from, comment in the comment section below. You'll get a prize. Don't know what the prize is, but you'll get one. Anyhow, all right. So if we credited capital to increase the balance in capital, it was a one-sided error. There was no other account affected by this error. Therefore, we need the suspense account. All right. All right. So the suspense account to facilitate double entry. And what we're going to put here, why you keep jumping up and you're annoying me? Come on, man. Philip, don't do that. Sorry, I do that. Whatever. Cut that part out there. Anyhow. Right. So to correct undercast capital. Next, let's go back across. Next error. Equipment was understated by 75,000. All right. So equipment was understated by 75,000. What does understated mean? We just said it. It means the balance is too low. And what do we need to do? We have to increase it. How do we increase equipment? Well, it depends. How do you classify equipment? Equipment is an asset. To record an increase in an asset, you have to debit. Let's go across the general journal. So we're going to see, right, a debit to equipment. And because, again, it was a one-sided error, there was no other account affected by the error, we use suspense account to facilitate the double entry. Every debit needs a corresponding credit. Cool. And the narration would simply be to correct undercast equipment. Okay, let's go back across to the errors. So we have revenue was overstated. Overstated means it was too high. To fix it, we have to decrease the balance in the account. What is the account? Revenue. How do we decrease revenue? We debit revenue to decrease it. Okay, let's go to the journal. So we're going to debit revenue, And once again, we need the suspense account because there was a one-sided error. There was no other account affected by the error. So we use suspense account because every debit needs a corresponding credit. How do we fix this? Sorry, was in narration, right? To correct under cash revenue. Okay, just 2 more to go. Let's go back across to the other side. Right, rent was understated. What does understated mean? The balance is too low. To fix it, we have to increase the balance in the rent account. What is rent? Well, usually, unless otherwise specified, rent is an expense account. To increase the balance in an expense account, you have to debit. So let's go back across to the general journal. So we're going to have to debit rent. I could put rent expense, but once again, the columns are kind of narrow. So if I do that, it will kind of spill over and cause things to become unaligned. And every debit needs a corresponding credit. And we use suspense account because it was a one-sided error. There was no other account affected. Now, if you're getting annoyed by me saying this over and over, it's because I wanted to stick in your brain. All right? And repetition helps with that. Okay? So we corrected under cash rent. So one more error. Let's take a look. Loan was understated. So we know what that means. It is too low. How do we fix that? If it's too low, we increase. How do we increase loan? Well, it depends. How do you classify loan? Loan is a liability. How do we increase liabilities? We credit. So if you go across here now, the credit will go to the loan account, which means that the debit will go to the suspense account. Why? Because there was a one-sided error. No other account was affected by the error, and we need the suspense account to facilitate double entry. Every credit needs a, I heard you. Very good, very good. I heard some strips in to be yourself. Okay, so let me see how best I can make the suspense account visible. All right, so that way we won't have too much scrolling up and down and jumping around to do, because yeah. Okay. All right. So first of all, we need the balance in the trial balance. So let's go back across to the trial balance, and we're seeing the balance highlighted, suspense account in the debit column. So let's go on the debit side of the suspense account, and we're going to put difference as per trial balance. Again, I'm only abbreviating because I don't have enough room. You guys should not abbreviate in your exercises and your tests, especially a test. Okay, let's get these entries in the suspense account going. First one. So the first one is a debit to suspense. So we're going to go on the debit side of suspense, and we're going to put in capital for 100. The next one has a credit to suspense for 75. So we're going to go on the credit side of suspense and put equipment 75. Thirdly, we have another credit to suspense for 125. So we're going to put that on the credit side, 125. Then we have another credit for 50. So we're going to put that, and it's going to say, sorry, it's going to say revenue. Or rent. I double revenue, sorry, my bad. And finally, we have another debit to suspense for 120, and that's going to say loan. The debit side, 30 and 100 is 130, 130 plus 120 is 250, right? And also on this side now, 75 and 125 is 200, 200 plus 50 is 250. And your suspense account is, well, it balances off. There's no need to balance it. All right, debit side is good to the credit side, and you have corrected all of the errors. Good job. Okay guys, so that's basically it for suspense accounts. If you guys have any questions or if there's anything you think I missed out, let me know in the comment section below. If you want to see more videos, please give either of those boxes a click across there. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and you can subscribe by clicking on my face. And don't forget to click on my other face in the middle of the screen to go to my website to download the handouts that you need to get. Okay guys, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.